Mohammed al-Bashir is appointed the head of Syria's transitional government until 2025. Former Syrian Prime Minister al-Jalali agrees to transfer power to the opposition-led Salvation government. And Syria files a UN complaint demanding an end to Israeli aggression during the transition period. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time and you're now watching Q News. I'm Henny Saif and we'll begin today's news bulletin with the latest developments in Syria. Head of the Syrian Salvation Government, Mohammed al-Bashir, has officially been appointed head of the transitional government and is set to manage affairs until March 1st of 2025. In today's session, al-Bashir confirmed the transfer of files between the Salvation Government and the previous cabinet to ensure continuity. He emphasized that the focus was on transferring executive powers and overseeing government operations during the transitional period. Earlier, former Syrian Prime Minister Mohammed Ghazi al-Jalali announced his decision to transfer power to the Salvation government aligned with Syrian opposition factions. Al-Jalali held discussions with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham leader Ahmad al-Shara, also known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, to outline the transition process. This development follows the earlier appointment of Mohammed al-Bashir to form a new transitional government. The UN Special Envoy to Syria, Geir Pedersen, has called the recent developments in Syria unexpected. At a press conference, Pedersen described Syria as being at a crossroads after al-Assad's regime fell, urging unity among factions and calling for an end to the northern conflict and Israeli strikes. Pedersen emphasized maintaining public institutions, achieving stability and supporting humanitarian aid. He stressed implementing inclusive transitional arrangements in Damascus to represent all Syrians. Syria's permanent UN representative, Qusay al-Dahaq, says Syria has filed a complaint with the UN Security Council and Secretary General Antonio Guterres, calling for an end to Israel's aggression and preventing Israel from benefiting from Syria's regime change. Al-Dahaq stated that Syria's UN mission and embassies will continue operations during the transition, with the foreign minister still active in Damascus. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu affirmed that the occupied Syrian Golan Heights will remain part of Israel and ordered the military to seize the buffer zone along the Syrian border, with backing from Defense Minister Israel Katz and the Security Cabinet. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has emphasized that Syria's political process should be fully Syrian-owned, free from external interference. He stressed on the importance of preventing any attempts to undermine Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Abdulati called for an inclusive political approach that ensures stability and reflects Syria's societal diversity without excluding any national factions. He reiterated the need for a political process that fosters unity, supporting the long-term goal of restoring stability to Syria. The spokesman for Antonio Guterres, Stefanie Dujarric, has expressed that the UN wants the best possible future for the Syrian people and one that they choose themselves. Earlier on Monday, the UN refugee chief called for patience as millions of Syrian refugees displaced by the 13-year-old civil war weigh a possible return to the country after the toppling of President Bashar al-Assad.
And on the return
of refugees, obviously it will, listen, people are...
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said that it was Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's personal decision to step down and leave his country. Peskov added that the Kremlin stresses the need for a deep analysis of the developments in the Middle East after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria over the weekend. The Gulf Cooperation Council has condemned the ongoing attacks by the Israeli occupation forces on Syrian territory. Earlier, Saudi Arabia condemned Israel's actions of seizing the buffer zone in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights and targeting Syrian territories, highlighting Israel's continued violations of international law. The Saudi Foreign Ministry stressed that these actions undermine Syria's chances for security, stability, and territorial integrity. Israel has denied reports that its forces advanced beyond the buffer zone separating the Israeli-occupied Syrian Golan Heights from Syrian territory. Syrian sources, however, claim the incursion extended as far as 25 kilometers from Damascus. One source reported that Israeli forces reached Qatana, a town just east of the buffer zone and a short distance from Damascus International Airport. The Israeli military reportedly began seizing control of the demilitarized buffer zone over the weekend. The area was established under a 1974 ceasefire agreement between the two countries. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has unveiled measures to address threats linked to the potential collapse of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime. Netanyahu has instructed Israeli forces to secure the buffer zone and strategic locations, including Jabal al-Sheikh. He also hinted at possible opportunities for a detainee exchange deal as part of the ongoing developments. Two Syrian security sources have reported that Israeli planes bombed 3 major Syrian army air bases, housing dozens of helicopters and jets in the largest strike on air bases since Bashar al-Assad's overthrow. The sources said the Qamishli air base in northeast Syria, the Shinshar base in the countryside of Homs, and the Aqraba airport in southwest Damascus were all hit. Israel also waged several strikes on a research center on the outskirts of Damascus and a center for electronic warfare near the Sayyida Zainab area of the capital. A monitor of Syria's war has reported recording more than 300 Israeli strikes since the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime over the weekend. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Israeli warplanes have targeted factories in Aleppo belonging to the Syrian Air Force, as well as weapons and ammunition warehouses on the outskirts of Damascus, along with several other locations across Syria. The attacks included a wide range of military assets in provinces such as Deir ez-Zor, Hama, Homs, Al-Hasaka, Latakia, Damascus, Rif Dimishq, Daraa, Qintira, and Aleppo. A spokeswoman for Iran's government, Fatima Mohajirani, has said 4,000 Iranian citizens have returned to the country from Syria since the overthrow of al-Assad. Speaking at a press conference in the capital, Mohajirani said the citizens left on 10 flights organized by the Iranian airline Mahan. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said the UK must now talk to regional and global allies about a political way forward for Syria. Starmer added that the situation in the country was volatile after Syrian armed groups seized the capital Damascus on Sunday. British Senior Minister Pat McFadden said earlier that the UK could rethink its proscription of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham as a banned organization after the group spearheaded the Syrian rebel alliance that helped oust al-Assad. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has said Turkey is opening its Yaladagi border gate with Syria to manage the safe and voluntary return of the millions of Syrian migrants it hosts. The Yaladagi crossing, which is close to the northwest edge of Syria, has been closed since 2013 due to fighting near the border. NATO member Turkey hosts around 3 million Syrian migrants and refugees, making it the biggest host of Syrians who have fled the civil war.
Bilinmemiş, manası anlaşılmamıştır. Esed
Hundreds of Syrians, including refugees, have started leaving Lebanon for their homes after armed forces took control of Damascus. According to official figures, Lebanon hosts more than 2 million Syrian refugees, including nearly 300,000 who are not officially registered with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Lebanon's northern provinces have recorded a displacement movement from border villages inside Syria to the city of Hermel, opposite the Syrian town of Qusayr. The Lebanese General Security has closed most land crossings with Syria except for Masna, easing return procedures for refugees. Qatar has announced launching an airlift to provide humanitarian aid to Syrian people following the fall of the Bashar al-Assad regime. The Qatari Foreign Ministry said that under the directions of the country's Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the first Qatari military cargo plane arrived in Turkey's southeastern Gaziantep city, carrying food and medical assistance provided by the Qatar Fund for Development. Austria's chancellor has stated that his country supports Syrians wishing to return home. That came as European countries began preparing plans to deport Syrian refugees as a response to the rising calls for deportation in the past year, fueled by the growing influence of far-right anti-immigration parties. Austria announced plans to deport Syrian migrants following al-Assad's regime downfall. Similarly, Belgium, France, Greece and Germany suspended processing asylum applications from Syrians. For another consecutive day, tensions have escalated in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights as Israeli actions draw widespread regional condemnation.
Israeli activities in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights have escalated, with its occupation forces advancing into Syrian territory and reinforcing border defenses. These measures include clearing landmines, digging trenches, and repositioning border fences deeper into the demilitarized zone to create a buffer zone. While Israel claims these actions are necessary to counter security threats, Syrian and Lebanese officials accuse it of violating international agreements and pursuing expansionist objectives. The developments have drawn widespread international concern. The United Nations Disengagement Observer Force, responsible for monitoring the ceasefire line in the occupied Golan Heights, is closely tracking the situation. Diplomats warn that such action could further destabilize an already volatile region amid broader Middle East conflicts. Arab countries including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Jordan, and Iraq, along with the Arab League, have strongly condemned Israel's incursions. A UN spokesperson criticized the actions as violations of the 1974 disengagement agreement with Syria. Iran has described the measures as part of Israel's broader regional aggression. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies remain focused on countering Iran's influence in Syria and Lebanon. Despite these reactions, Syria has notably refrained from issuing official statements condemning the Israeli incursions into its territory. This silence highlights the precarious situation in the Golan Heights and raises fears that it could become a new flashpoint in the region's enduring tensions.
And for more analysis on this story, I'll now hand you over to Selma in our newsroom. Selma.
Thank you so much, Hani. And for further analysis on the current situation in Syria, we're joined from California by world politics analyst Dr. Ashraf Singer. Dr. Ashraf, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. Let me first start by asking you, what are the main challenges Mohammed al-Bashir will be facing as head of Syria's transitional government?
So Mohammed al-Bashir is facing a very huge challenge, particularly how to lead the government. How to bring all parties together. Unfortunately, Syria under huge transition, particularly the different groups. They have different backgrounds to help Syria very well. So we have like a group, belong to the guys the United Nations or United States called them as a terrorist group, but now they are trying to adapt them as a civilian, and they are condemned, the terrorist act. So this is another way of how the international community can accept, the Muhammad al-Bashir, government. This is very second in terms of running, the bureaucracy or response to the people need of Syria. We need to understand which country is leading Syria now for that transition. Either the United States, Turkey, or who is helping the new government, to work better to respond to the people needs in terms of running, the bureaucracy body. But unfortunately, it's still unclear, and I can see it's still a huge challenge facing, the new government.
Sir, can you now expand on the key priorities for al-Bashir's government during the transitional period?
So al-Bashir government, basically he adopt or he, the old model that we called, that he need to ease the life for people in terms of that transition. But unfortunately, the airstrike by Israel, it's creating a very big noise, or a big annoy for the Bashir government too, because basically you need really to see the country in that transition is peaceful transition, is not violent transition. So what I'm seeing now, it's the shortage, of course, of food, and the currency of Syria fall down dramatically. And now the Bashir does need to secure, the needs of people from international, imports, uh, many services and goods to the Syria. For example, the medicine, the food, and other stuff that even the Syria agriculture sector or the industrial sectors need to run the state economy. So it's a big chaos, but we understand that this nation under that transition does need the time and does need the support. But the most important, we
Now,
need to
sir, sorry for interrupting you, but I would like to shed light on the United States, which has been in contact with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham to ensure the establishment of this new transitional government. How will this impact the role of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in this transition, especially with its influence on the Syrian Salvation Government?
This is a good point because United States Antony Blinken, he said yesterday that the new government in Syria should respect the international law and international human law and humanitarians aspects in dealing with either the opposition of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or in general that Syria should really present itself as it is matching with the international standards as a new government. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, particularly, the Al Gulani, uh, is facing a very huge challenge in terms of European countries and the other countries except United States. They're gonna to ban uh, this organization or ban him or gonna to accept him. So they need time, to decide. But United States, of course, uh, needs to give a time to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham because Hayat Tahrir al-Sham currently is the leading group in Syria compared to the other groups. But you can imagine about 60 group, they have different background, different countries backing them. I'm not really optimistic to see that situation is gonna be like smoothly for Syria, but that land by United States, didn't really succeed in the past, in Iraq, in Libya, in Yemen. So I'm very worried about Syria. So I hope that Syria can really make, the Syrians can really make that transition easily and smoothly to save their countries. But it seems to me now the situation is pretty hard, and I don't know exactly what is the best scenario that United States does need to see in Syria. Particularly, Turkey is not happy all the time because the Turkish forces, I'm sorry, the group that is, backed by the Turkish forces, was really in fighting with the group backed by the United States. So it seems to me like there is a kind of balance of power or a kind of a new transition in Syria between Turkey and United States, and of course Israel on that side of United States too. So this is a major challenge uh, for the many rules in Syria, particularly
Now,
United States and
sir,
Turkey.
building on what you said regarding the Syrian civilians, in what ways could the humanitarian organizations and specifically the UN support the Syrian people during this period of transition?
So, of course, in that time, we should really receive kind of support, and the United Nations can really ask of it their agencies or it is agencies, to start to deliver, service and goods in terms of that shortage in Syria. So this is the first things that we should think about it. But if that security is pretty hard to get it soon, or that degree of instability, it's pretty high. So of course, that United Nations and other agencies cannot really perform its function in Syria now till they can really see at that degree of security. So the most important now we need really to secure Syria and make sure that the situation is pretty stable there. So United Nations and other nations can really help Syria in that transition, but this is a major challenge currently. Yeah.
Lastly, sir, in light of these fast paced developments, what are the potential scenarios in light of these unfolding events?
Wow, it's pretty hard to predict, but based on my analysis about the different groups and different backgrounds in terms of they were so religious, not only religious, but even ultra religious. And many of these groups adapt, unfortunately, to say that, but this is actually the current situation in Aleppo and Homa and Homs and Damascus now, around the Damascus. So all of them, they really got that rooted from Al Qaeda, the way the ideas, so this is actually very bad because these guys, they are very extreme and they cannot really accept what that kind of a change by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham needed, because the al-Julani was adapting, like ISIS. So imagine, like we have ISIS, they are on the Syrian ground. think about the other group. They really link with the other ultra ideas uh, in terms of interpretation of Islam. So seeing that challenges and the Muslim
Sir,
Brotherhood.
sorry for interrupting you due to the shortage of time. That was world politics analyst Dr. Ashraf Singer from California. Thank you so much for your insights. And now we're going to move back to Hani for more news and developments around the world.
Thank you, Selma. Well, actually, that brings us to the end of our news bulletin for this hour, but here's a reminder of today's top stories. Mohammed al-Bashir is appointed head of Syria's transitional government until 2025. Former Syrian Prime Minister al-Jalali agrees to transfer power to the opposition-led Salvation government. And Syria files a UN complaint demanding an end to Israeli aggression during its transition. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour, but please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.